Hey everybody, this is Chris. I heard from a couple people that were a little worried about the group project, so I wanted to hopefully ease some fears with just a short video. I guess the first thing I'm going to say is I plan to send out a question announcement or ask you all on Monday or Tuesday who all was able to get a hold of the group members and maybe do some shuffling around with people after that to make sure everybody is in a group where they can get a hold and communicate with the group members. Because, well, there's some people that they turned in the first assignment and I haven't seen them since. And when all I can see is the roster, it's kind of hard to know who's participating or still in the class or not. So I was going to check and maybe shuffle the groups around. So you should be able to get a hold of all your group partners. Make sure everybody's in a good group to do the project. And for our GUI package, the graphical user interface, we're going to be using Django, which is set up to, it's a web framework. So we do a web page with HTML and CSS and all that modern stuff to make the web page look really, really nice. And then Django allows us to do Python scripting to control what's happening on that web page, adjust the data that goes to it and all of that. And, well, I thought I'd walk through a couple steps, sort of the minimum, to see what we need to do to get that going, because, well, tutorials, especially the tutorials chosen for an online class, kind of show every little detail. And, well, same thing as the GitHub videos a couple weeks ago. We don't necessarily need every little detail here. So let's look at some of the sort of the bare minimum to get started. And then later in the semester, we'll look at how to move that from your local machine to a server somewhere. But for now, we want to test it on our local machines, so we need to use a virtual server, or Django is set up for local testing using what's called a loopback, where we open a browser and just open some stuff on our own machine. So we'll set up a little virtual environment, and to do that, we want to install a module. So open whichever terminal you're comfortable with, Bash, PowerShell, Command, whichever one you prefer to use. It should be the same instructions for all of them. You can't just say pip install directly if your system's configured for it, but I always do this way in examples because this works both, whether it's configured or not. Pip will work this way. So we'll call the pip module, which is part of Python. That stands for preferred install package. Sorry, preferred installer package. The thing that installs the modules for us. And we want to install pip env. Pip env, which is a virtual environment. It's already satisfied on mine, but you'll see a bunch of meters and downloading and things like that happening. Once you have that set up, well, then we're ready to make our Django project. We just wanted to use a virtual environment for it. So the first thing we need to do is navigate to our working directory. I always keep a working directory called delete, and then every couple days I either move stuff out of it or delete everything that's in there. Currently, don't have anything in it, so I'll make a new directory. Testing 1, 2, 3. That sounds like a good name for this. So make this folder. And I'll go ahead and go into this. So now we're ready to start doing this. And, well, we're used to calling the Python module, but we want to use the virtual environment. So while we're here in this folder, which currently is just a new folder, there's nothing in it, instead of saying Python and then having the Python interpreter do stuff, I'm going to call that pip env that we just installed, the pip virtual environment, and install Django with that. Oh, maybe I have to do this. Python-m, the Python pip env environment, and then use that to install Django. Okay, apparently my bash shell isn't configured correctly, but it'll go through this stuff, set up some stuff. So it created this virtual environment. This link here will be important. So this is where it created our virtual environment. So that's where we're actually going to be working at. And you want to keep watching this stuff. And when it gets back to the prompt, if you want, you can kind of copy this address. Whoops. That's not copying a bash shell. Let me right click and copy that, because bash shell won't use Control-C. Then let's see, Windows E, and I'll paste that address in. So it created this folder over here with a whole bunch of things in it. You can kind of look around that, see what's there. That's our working thing. Oh, I guess I could, while I'm here, open that, Alt-D, and go to Documents, the delete folder. And here's that folder we just created, and it put 2 files inside of there. You can open them up and look at them. They're both part of a manifest, which if you haven't encountered that term before, programming manifest are very similar to the traditional usage of ship manifest. It's the list of everything on the boat and why it was on the boat. So same thing for our software, because software is usually built up from lots and lots of different files. So we have those. So now we're ready to work. Our little virtual environment is set up, and we're ready to create a Django project in it. So to create the Django project, we want a folder to put that in. So I'm going to make a directory called class example. That seems like a good name for it. Class-example. Well, I'll just call it class. Make a directory called class. That way it's a lot easier to type, because after I typed that, I was like, oh, I'm going to make a typo if I do that. So we have that folder there. We'll just navigate into that like normal. And now we want to use our virtual environment to work in here. So we'll enter the instruction pip in, which if, depending on your configuration, you might have to go through the Python interpreter and open that pip in as a module. This works no matter how it's configured, whether you set it up to accept that directly or your system knows about Python. And then the instruction we want is shell. When we do this, launching a subshell, so we have a virtual environment. You'll notice we're back at the home directory. I'm in bash, so I chose bash for this, so it shows as a tilde. If we have the big Windows directory, it's a lot of folders to read through. You might not notice the change, but it goes back to the home directory. So you do need to make sure you navigate back to the directory you're actually working in, where the Django project is. So documents, put it in the delete folder. And then there's a folder called testing123. And this has that class folder where our project's going to go. So, and notice when I cleared out, that first command to go into the virtual shell didn't clear off the screen. So there's sort of a sub bash shell running inside the main bash shell right now. And that's where we need to do our work for the Django projects. Which the work we need to do is, well, set up the project. So to do that, once we get through all that virtual environment and have the virtual shell running, we'll start by putting the command Django admin, or we'll have Django admin start a project, and then we need to give it a name. So Django admin, notice that's kind of like the Python up here. That's the software that's going to run the instruction. We're going to run this start project instruction and give it a name. Notice now it created a folder for us. So if I navigate into that, and you'll see there's a couple things there. Might be better to look at it where there's pictures, right? If we go over to the delete folder, in the class folder, there's this example thing, and this is manage.py, and a whole bunch of Python files in here. So those things are set up ready for us to a bunch of the things we're going to need to work with this project. So we'll bring those in every time, and now we're ready to create the web page we want. Well, first, I guess we better make sure everything's configured correctly and open this up in a browser and make sure we get to the default Django page before we start making our own HTML page. Get this out of the way. Whoops. Clear all this. And to start, well, one of the files in there, I guess I could have looked at this first. Go back in Documents and navigate all the way through here. Probably would have been quicker just to type it up here in the address bar. There's this manage.py file. So we'll use that to start our local loopback server so we can run a test environment. There's a bunch of Python script in there. You can open it, kind of take a look at that. All of our Python modules are just Python scripts like we're writing. It's just some that are already written, so we can use them. There's no need for everybody to write the same code. So we'll have the Python interpreter, and if you're on a Mac, remember you probably want me to use Python 3, not just Python. I'm on a Windows machine, so it's going to be just regular Python. Then we'll run that manage.py script, and in particular, the function we want to run from that is run server, so we can just enter that here instead of calling it later. So we're going to run that script and call this function from that script. And notice that kind of like when we open Jupyter Notebooks. It's doing something and it never quite finished doing something. Well, it did give us an address here though. So the development server is at 127.0.0.1. And if you have not encountered that before, that's a standard IP addressing. The machine you're on is always 127.0.0.1. And we are on port 8000. Oh, in this command, we could have added a port number afterwards if you want to use a different port, but by default, it's port 8000. So we can just go to a browser, open up a new tab in the browser, and enter that. So I'm going to go to IP address 127.0.0.1 on port 8000. So my local machine, and then that particular way of connecting to my local machine. Oh, looks like the Django server is up and running. So now we're ready to add our own web page to it. And then we'll have Python dynamically control the web page to make more interesting things happen. And that's how we're going to make our graphical user interfaces for the project in this class. Which is a much more modern way of doing it because every day more and more things switch over to web-based apps instead of local installs. So as we go to start making our web pages, well, the first thing you're going to notice is that our terminal or command prompt, whichever one you're using, it's in the middle of doing something because it's running the web server. So we'll need another one. You can click up here on the icon on almost all of them and get to a menu. Depending on which terminal it is, you might have a regular menu or somewhere you'll have a new button. In some of the terminals, Control-T, just like opening a new tab in a browser, is sort of a standard way to do that. But that gives us a new terminal we can type in, while that other one, we can enter more instructions for all that stuff in the background that we don't have buttons to click on in order to access it. Because these things are actually intended to be running on a server. That's why you have to go in through some sort of shell. And this one can keep running the server, and we can do stuff here. So let's change directory to wherever we're working at. /testing123/class/example. So I'll go back in here, and I'm in an entirely new shell, so I do need to start that pip environment again. So have the Python interpreter look at the pip environment module and run the shell. which sends us back to the home directory. So we need to navigate to the directory we actually want to work in. All right, and now we can start creating our own page. So once again, I'm going to have the Python interpreter. We're doing stuff in Python, and we're going to call this pre-built script manage.py that Django gave to us, and this time we want to call the start app function, and then we'll give it a name. I'll just call it my page. So I couldn't think of a name very quick. So now if I list this out, notice we have another folder. Maybe I should look from the folders. So open File Explorer and navigate through all these folders. And we have this, and once again we have a whole bunch of Python scripts in there ready to work with, ready to send data to a page for us. Before we get too far though, we better make sure that the Django framework knows about our new app here. So we'll come back up to this top level we set up here. And in the example folder, that initial one, you'll see this file called settings. So open that with your preferred editor. I like to use just basic text editors, and instead of the fancy IDEs that have all the pre-built functionality that takes control away from me. So open it with your favorite text editor or wherever you normally edit your code. And if you scroll down, you'll see this Python list called installed apps. Well, we just created a new app. Let's see, where was the previous instruction? I think it was over here. Nope. Maybe this little, there it is. We just created a new app called My Page, so we need to make sure Django knows about it. So in that list of installed apps, we'll add a string called My Page. And save that. And yeah, I know there's a lot of setup here. You'll get quite used to it because it's only a couple things. We just have to tell Django about that. So that's in that first overall folder we created called, there's a settings. We add our apps to that, but we also have to tell things where to find them. So in that first one we created, not the app, the original start the project, there's also a Python script called URLs. So once again, open that with your preferred text editor. And this one has instructions, so this one's a little less easier to remember because there's instructions, but if you scroll down, there's URL patterns. So this is what we will enter in the address bar. Those numbers represent a virtual server. So from that server, then we'll have like word-based addresses that we'll enter in a normal situation when we don't have that fancy local server running. And right above it, you'll see here's the instructions to include other ones. So we added an app, and in our other app, we're going to set up a bunch of URLs. So we need to say how to find it. So it'll look a lot like the previous one. We'll say path, and we created a new path called My Page. Pages or My Site might have been a better name. I was only going to do one page in the example here. And when we say where to get that, we have to import one more method. So notice we're importing this path method, and from the same library, import include, and then we can use that include the my page dot URLs. It doesn't look like it, but this is actually a file path. When we type file paths in Python, like when we import things, that's like the Django folder /urls.py file. That's how we have to put it in our code. So it is still a file path. So we need to kind of put in that way, and that will tell Django where to find it. And that's our overall settings. So now we can go back and work in our project. Let's see. Class. Yeah, in class, an example. In my page, we need to create that URLs file. So we'll make a new Python script and just go ahead and save it there in that location. The testing, the class, and the location for the app. So example has our overall stuff, the project files, and my page is a particular website. We can put lots of websites on one in one project. So we'll create a new one called urls.py. The same name we just told the settings to point at. And yeah, I know this is a lot. I'm trying to keep this video short. It's probably going to be about 4 more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes. That way you can watch it, hopefully watch it a couple times really quick and kind of see this part, because this is all, there's a lot of setup involved, but once we get things set up, then Django becomes much easier. So I want to walk through this setup. So in our urls.py script, we're going to import a module from django.urls. We need to import that path object, the same one we just used, or the path function. We just saw in another one. And from dot, and the dot always refers to our current directory. Because in the directory we also have a views script. We're going to want to import from that. So from the current directory, we want to import views. And now we'll just create a list called URL patterns equals some list, and Django internally will look for the URL patterns we put into this Python script, and every time we make a web page, we just add the path to that web page to this list. So we need a name to refer to it. I'll call it my page. It does not have to match exactly what we're calling it. I always like to end in a slash. It'll work without a slash, but if we start nesting things inside of there, it's better to have the slash there. I'm going to give it the same name, but that's not a requirement. And then we need to say where it is. So, if actually probably should give it another name, because I already called it my page. That's the little app here, so I'll call it homepage. So we go over to the browser and have this loopback server / my page / homepage. That's when Django's going to know to go to this address, which will be views, and we need some function. I'll just call it home. And now we'll go write that function so that whenever this shows up in the address bar, Django will know to call this home function on the views page. So let's go write that, and that will be an HTML page. Okay, and hopefully somebody in your group knows HTML. If not, I will make a video for quick introductions to HTML, or we can meet up and kind of go over some stuff. So I'm going to open that views.py folder and create your views here. Request might have been a better name. So request is what page are we requesting? What page do we want to view? And it needs to be a function, and in particular, it's the function we put the name of here. which I just realized looking back over here, I made a typo. Parentheses means to call the function. As soon as it hits parentheses, it's going to run the function. We do not want to run the function here. We just want to load it in. We want to treat, on the URLs page, we want to treat the function like a variable that's holding a bunch of instructions. So we don't want to actually put the parentheses on there and call the function. Well, we don't want to do that. We want to let Django do that in the background. Another one of the pre-built pieces of code will actually call the function. We just have to tell it which one to call. So no parentheses on the URL. Sorry, almost missed that typo. But here, we're going to create that function. Whoops. We're going to create the home function, and it will take in a parameter called request, or whatever you want to call the parameter, but it is a server request, so that's a good name for it. And now we need some sort of string to send back when we get that request. So I'm going to create a string called page. Let's see, I'll put in some HTML tags, add a head section, a title page. This is going to look like a mess. We're going to look at a cleaner one here and very shortly. I guess this video is much longer than I thought it would be. I'll just call it test page, and the title page, in the head section, start a body, and I'll put H1, hello world, in that tag, and in the HTML code. Hopefully that looks familiar to a few people. We almost never type it in one line like that. So that was just quickly for the example. You'd probably spread that out over a bunch of lines to make it easier to type. Right, start page as a blank string, and then do page plus equals the HTML tag. Then page plus equals the head tag, and add one line at a time like you would normally write your HTML code. But once we have that string, all the HTML is a string, we're going to return, we'll have our method return an HTTP response object that has that string as an argument being passed in. So we'll need to import that from Django.http import HTTP response. So a little bit of importing there, but we put our HTML code as a string, and then we can just send it back. So now, let's see if I move things out of the way. Is my server still running? I have a server here somewhere. This window way over here. Oh, I need to hit Control-C to cancel that one and start the server again. So I'm just going to hit up and restart the server. There we go. Because I made some changes. I'm going to pause the video and figure out what error I made here. Oh, whoops. That wasn't even an error. We actually put something here so we Django's no longer going to direct us to that default page. So from the server, since we're not being directed to the default page, we need to go to a page we know about. So we created a site called My Page. Probably should have called that My Site. And that has something called Homepage. And there's our HTML code. So that's how we send that back. We can also use templates. Let me move this out of the way. So we sent back this HTML code. We're seeing it on our browser now. That's the first way we can get pages. We can also use templates, But this is a 30-minute video now, so I'm going to stop here, and there's a better way to send stuff back. But then that's the setup. Once we get to everything set up, we'll just make a bunch of these functions, the return pages, and we can use a template where we write a HTML page like normal and load stuff in. And I'm going to make that as a separate video, and because this one's got really long, and then there was a lot of information there, but it's always the same. So hopefully that's a little more condensed than that 2-hour one, or many pages of reading followed by lots and lots of videos for the Django setup. So we need that set up, and then we can just have Python scripts send HTML code back as strings to be displayed on a browser. I'm going to make a second video for templates, which will be a big step forward in what we'll actually be using for the final project. I'll see you soon.